Disaster is brewing in the US right now. You're watching a collapse take place in slow motion. There is so much debt in the system, and I'll cover some of that today, that it simply cannot stand for too much longer. Money printing only gets you so far. We've seen that historically throughout so many countries. In fact, we're seeing it today in many of third world countries that are trying to print their way back to some sort of stability. And of course, it never works. Let's go into why the US economy is dead. The S&P 500 lands at 8-week low. Europe slowdown weighs. So let's see what CNBC decided to say. It's highlighted concern about the slowdown in global growth, highlighted by the IMF forecast this morning, and whether earnings will keep growing. They're concerned, as well as I'm concerned, and the earnings are all fraudulent. If you've ever read the book Infectious Greed by Frank Partnoy, you'll know how these earnings are completely fraudulent. They just make them up and decide when to post their bad earnings, and it's usually postponed into some sort of way down into the future. It's all fake. At the bottom, they said the economic data from Germany and France in particular has been weaker than expected. That's the way they tend to bring out this news. They always have this weaker than expected or better than expected, and you look at it and the numbers are really insignificant when you start looking at the real data. When you have 20+% unemployment in certain countries, their economic data that maybe rises by 0.5% or whatever it might be is almost completely insignificant. You have a major catastrophe going on right now, and these small percentages, these small ideas that they have aren't going to fix anything. You need a complete overhaul of the way they do business. Of course, that's not going to happen. Now, speaking of this, what I wanted to talk about was what I wrote about in my book. Rising interest rates will mean slower growth in the economy because less people are borrowing money and spending. Governments will have to pay more on their interest payments. Isn't that very interesting? You're looking at a country that is completely indebted right now. How in the world could it ever sustain increased interest rates? I was just talking about this with an individual I was consulting today, and actually it was brought to my attention that these countries, or these economists that are talking about this, generally in the Austrian camp, are suggesting that they will never increase the interest rates. And of course, the economy cannot be sustained without these low interest rates. But as we saw back in 1980, they were forced to increase the interest rates just to quell the inflation. We can expect that to occur, but we also have to pay attention to what happens with the economy. We already have a slowdown taking place right here to an 8-week low, which is very healthy, very natural. But if it continues to go this direction, then they will not be able to increase the interest rates. So, and of course, as I've said before, as I said in many instances, these will not be such a dramatic raising of the interest rates. You'll look at, perhaps 0.1 or 0.25% interest, and it will be very, very slow, and they'll wait. They will see if this does anything. Regardless, they're printing up money. They're giving it to institutions all around the world. Even though it's off balance sheet, they are able to prop up the system one way or another. I do believe that they could very well stop the QE program, and this would only have them engaging in QE later down the road. QE1, QE2, they stopped, at least from what the public eye was able to see. And look what happened. We had a QE3. So, of course, the QE3 could stop and we could have a QE4. The interest rates can be risen today, but they can be lowered again tomorrow. So what I see regardless is the same old story repeating over and over again. I'll move on quickly. What we have is a big problem here. Obamacare is one of those things. You have a tax burden, you have a debt burden, you have the government's burden ultimately, and who has to bear that is the taxpayer. Here are the new taxes you're going to pay for Obamacare. Business Insider talks about this, but you can research the fact that there are 21 additional taxes that are taking place because of Obamacare. Now, of course, Obama said Obamacare was free, but of course that's not the case. Nothing in life is free. 21 new taxes all for you. And of course, the businesses are hurt by this as well. One of those businesses being Walmart. Look what happened here. This is out of the AP. Walmart cuts health benefits for some part-timers, but if you look at this, it's saying it's affecting, I believe it was 30,000. The move affects 30,000 employees. Now, of course, that's only 5% of the part-time workforce. However, that's a big number, 30,000. Let's go on here. Talking about burdened with a record amount of debt. Student loans have hit a record high of $1.2 trillion. This is a bubble in itself. Why is there this $1 trillion fund here, let's call it, that's going to be used? Of course, the US government will probably have to bail it out at some point, consider it an asset, I'm sure, and they'll put it as part of their asset-backed securities, collateralized debt obligations. It will somehow get rolled into all of that. That's probably what's going to happen with this. So again, the individuals are going to have to, the citizens are going to have to shoulder this debt burden, and the individuals aren't getting good jobs. That's why they're suffering right now. And right here, this is out of the Washington Examiner, talking about Judicial Watch suing for the Freedom of Information Act. The Obamas and Vice President Joe Biden have charged taxpayers over $40 million for vacations. Think about it. In 6 years, how much have you spent on your vacation? Well, in this instance here, the president and vice president have spent $40 million. That's the kind of luxury that everyone wishes that they were involved in, but this right here is using the government money, and it's being used so foolishly. That's what's happening. There's a waste because we've allowed this to happen. We've allowed the government structure to be built up where you can have politicians and big corporations coinciding and colluding behind the scenes legally, and of course, this is going to be abused. If you found this informative, I would hope that you give me a thumbs up, and of course subscribe to the videos. This is very important to be a subscriber here. I hope that you would join the others, over 7,000 of us now being a subscriber on The Money GPS. Please share these videos with everyone you can, and don't forget to become an insider. The Insiders is where I give out all my best intel for free, and that's available at themoneygps.com. Just scroll down to the bottom, fill in your email address, and you'll get occasional emails from me.